On a peaceful summer morning, a golden retriever named Shadow suddenly freezes during his daily walk with his owner, Emily. His normally playful demeanor vanishing in an instant as they cross over the old stone bridge spanning a small creek, his paws plant firmly. On the ground, refusing to take another step forward, eyes fixed intently on something beneath them that only he can sense. Emily tugs gently at his leash, but the loyal dog won't budge, not even for the treats she offers. His entire body tense as, if warning of danger below, what Shadow discovers in those next heart-stopping moments will change not just Emily's life, but the lives of others who had given up hope long ago. If you like stories about animals who understand things, Humans Cannot Please subscribe to our channel now, so you don't miss any of these incredible tales of courage and compassion that remind us why dogs truly are mankind's best friends. Shadow, come on, buddy. What's wrong? Emily knelt beside her golden retriever, concern replacing her initial annoyance. The summer morning had been perfect for their daily walk, birds singing, sun warming their backs as they followed their usual route through Oak Ridge Park. Everything normal until they reached the old stone bridge. Shadow wasn't just being stubborn. His ears were perked forward, body rigid with attention. Emily had never seen him like this before. She followed his gaze between the gaps in the bridge's stone railing, seeing only shadows and the gentle flow of the creek below. "There's nothing down there, silly," she said, trying again to tug him forward. Shadow responded by planting his front paws more firmly, a low whine building in his throat. Emily sighed, glancing at her watch. She was already running late for work, but something about Shadow's behavior troubled her. In the 3 years since she'd adopted him from the Golden Retriever rescue, he'd never acted this way. "Okay, you win," she conceded, tucking her blonde hair behind her ears and peering more carefully over the edge of the bridge. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just the rocky creek bed, shallow water, and the cool darkness beneath the stone arch. Then she noticed something that didn't belong, a flash of blue fabric. A backpack, maybe? Emily squinted, leaning further. "Hello?" she called out, her voice echoing in the space beneath the bridge. "Is someone down there?" Shadow's whine grew more urgent. The sound that followed, faint, barely, audible over the babbling water, sent a chill down Emily's spine. It was a moan, human, pained. Emily's heart began to race. "Hold on, I'm coming down," she called, quickly securing Shadow's leash to a nearby bench. "Stay, Shadow, stay." The Golden Retriever watched anxiously as Emily scrambled down the steep embankment beside the bridge, slipping slightly on the damp earth. Approaching the shadowy space beneath the stone arch, she moved cautiously, aware that homeless people sometimes sought shelter in such places. "Hello? Are you hurt?" "I can help," she called, softer now. As her eyes adjusted to the dimness, details emerged. It wasn't just a random backpack she'd spotted. There was an entire makeshift camp tucked against the stone foundation, a tarp stretched to form a small tent, a rolled sleeping bag, a small collection of food wrappers and water bottles, neatly contained in a plastic bag. Someone had been living here, possibly for days. The care taken to keep the space organized suggested this wasn't just a temporary shelter. "Hello?" Emily called again, stepping carefully over a small pile of books. Paperbacks, she noted, classics like To Kill a Mockingbird and Pride and Prejudice. Whoever stayed here liked to read. A faint rustling sound came from deeper in the shadows, behind where the tarp was secured to create a small private area. Emily hesitated, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. She took her phone from her pocket, ready to call 911 if necessary. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said. "My dog sensed something wrong. Are you hurt?" Another moan, followed by a weak voice. "Help! Please!" Emily pushed aside the tarp and gasped. A young woman lay curled on her side, her face pale and drawn with pain. She couldn't have been more than 25, with matted dark hair and dirt-smudged features. Her clothes, once good quality jeans and a light sweater, were torn and stained. "Oh my God," Emily knelt beside her. "What happened? Should I call an ambulance?" The woman's eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing a startling blue. "Don't. Let them find me," she whispered before losing consciousness again. Emily noticed a water bottle nearby and checked it, nearly empty. She also saw a small wallet, partially open, but resisted the urge to look inside. Instead, she gently touched the woman's forehead. It was burning hot. With shaking hands, Emily dialed 911. "Emergency services. What's your—" "There's a woman under the bridge at Oak Ridge Park," Emily said quickly. "She's unconscious, has a fever. I think she needs medical help right away." "Is she breathing normally? Can you check her pulse?" Emily followed the dispatcher's instructions, feeling for the weak but present pulse in the woman's neck. "Yes, she's breathing, and I can feel her pulse, but she's really hot, and she was barely conscious a moment ago. Help is on the way. Stay on the line with me." From above, Emily could hear Shadow barking frantically. She imagined him straining against his leash, desperate to come to her side. "My dog," Emily explained to the dispatcher. "He's the one who found her, really. He wouldn't move on the bridge. It's like he knew she was down here." "Animals have amazing instincts," the dispatcher replied. "Can you hear the sirens yet?" Emily listened and caught the distant wail. "Yes, I can hear them coming. Stay with her until they arrive. Don't move her." Emily ended the call and gently took the woman's hand. "Help is coming. You're going to be okay." The woman didn't respond, but her fingers twitched slightly in Emily's grasp. Emily looked around the small camp again, noticing details she'd missed before. A small notebook with a pen clipped to it, a plastic bag containing toiletries, toothbrush, soap, deodorant, everything neatly arranged, despite the circumstances. This wasn't the chaotic space of someone living rough long-term. It seemed more temporary, deliberate. The sirens grew louder, and Shadow's barking intensified. Soon, Emily could hear voices calling from above. "Down here," she shouted, "under the bridge." Moments later, two paramedics carefully made their way down the embankment, carrying equipment. Emily moved back to give them space, explaining what little she knew. "I was walking my dog and he just stopped on the bridge. Wouldn't move. That's—" When I looked down and saw something, the female paramedic nodded as she checked the woman's vital signs. "Dogs know things. Fever's high. Probably an infection. How long has she been here, do you know?" "No idea. I walk here every day, but I've never noticed anything before." The paramedics worked efficiently, starting an IV and carefully moving the young woman onto a stretcher. Emily followed them up the embankment where a small crowd had gathered. Shadow was still at the bench where she'd left him, straining against his leash and whining. "It's okay, boy," Emily said, kneeling to embrace him as the paramedics loaded the stretcher into the ambulance. "You did good. So good." A police officer approached, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, could I get some information from you?" Emily answered, his questions explaining how Shadow had alerted her to the woman under the bridge. The officer took down Emily's contact details and asked if she'd noticed anything else. "She had some belongings down there," Emily said. "A small camp setup, books, a notebook, and a wallet, I think." The officer nodded. "We'll check it out." "Did she say anything to you?" Emily hesitated, remembering the woman's words. She just asked for help. She was barely conscious. As the ambulance prepared to leave, Emily impulsively approached. "Which hospital are you taking her to?" "Mercy General," the paramedic answered. Emily nodded, watching as the doors closed and the ambulance pulled away, sirens blaring once more. "Hey, come on, Shadow," she said, untying his leash. "I think we're going to be late for work today." As they walked home, Emily couldn't shake the image of the young woman's face or her whispered plea, "Don't let them find me." Who was them? And why was a clearly educated young woman hiding under a bridge instead of seeking proper help? Shadow trotted beside her, seemingly relieved now that the woman had been found, his tail wagging with the satisfaction of a job. "Well done." Emily scratched behind his ears. "You're something special, you know that?" she told him. "How did you know she was there?" Shadow simply looked up at her with his warm brown eyes, as if to say some things can't be explained. Back at her apartment, Emily called into work explaining the situation. Her boss was understanding, telling her to take the day if she needed it. Emily was grateful. She couldn't focus on graphic design projects with the morning's events replaying. In her mind, she fed Shadow his breakfast, which he devoured enthusiastically, then sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee. She'd given her statement to the police, done what any decent person would do. The young woman was getting medical care now. That should be the end of it. But something nagged at Emily. The woman's words, her obvious fear, the careful arrangement of her few possessions, the quality of her clothing beneath the dirt and wear. She wasn't just a homeless person, was she, Shadow? Emily mused aloud. Her dog tilted his head, listening. She was hiding from someone. Emily had volunteered at the Golden Retriever Rescue long enough to recognize signs of trauma and fear. The woman under the bridge had reminded her of some of the abused dogs they'd taken in, alert to danger, expecting the worst. Before she could talk herself out of it, Emily grabbed her keys. "Come on, Shadow. We're going to the hospital." Shadow bounded eagerly to the door, tail wagging. Ever since Emily had adopted him 3 years ago after finding him abandoned and half-starved in an empty lot near her apartment, they'd been inseparable. She sometimes joked that they had rescued each other, she from loneliness after moving to a new city, and he from a life on the streets. Mercy General Hospital was busy when they arrived. Emily tied Shadow to a bike rack near the entrance, making sure he had shade and water from a portable bowl she always carried. "I'll be right back, buddy," she promised. At the information desk, Emily hesitated. She wasn't family, had no connection to the woman beyond finding her. Still, she had to try. "I'm inquiring about a patient brought in this morning," she said, to the receptionist. "A young woman found under the bridge at Oak Ridge Park. I'm the one who found her, and I just wanted to know if she's okay." The receptionist gave her a sympathetic look. "I understand, but unless you're family—" "Please," Emily interrupted. "I don't need details, just to know if she's all right." The woman hesitated, then typed something into her computer. "She's been admitted. That's all I can tell you." Emily nodded, thanking her. At least the woman was alive. As she turned to leave, a voice called out, "Excuse me." Emily turned to see a man approaching, mid-40s, with a weathered face and tired eyes. He wore plain clothes but carried himself with authority. "I'm Detective Martinez," he said, showing a badge. "You're the woman who found our Jane Doe this morning?" "Jane Doe? You don't know who she is?" The detective shook his head. "No it on her or in her belongings. I was hoping you might have more information." "I told the officer everything at the scene," Emily said. "My dog sensed something was wrong, and I found her under the bridge." Detective Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "Your dog, huh? Good instincts. The doctors say she might not have made it another day without medical attention. Severe dehydration, infection from an untreated wound on her leg." Emily felt a chill. "Will she be okay?" "They think so with proper care." He studied Emily's face. "Most people would have called it in and gone about their day. What brings you to the hospital?" Emily shifted uncomfortably. "I just wanted to make sure she was all right. Something about her situation seemed off." "Off how?" Emily hesitated, then decided to be honest. She had a small camp set up, neat, organized books, classics. She didn't seem like someone who'd been homeless long-term, and right before she passed out again, she said something about not letting them find her. This caught the detective's attention. "Them?" She specifically used that word? Emily nodded, like she was afraid of someone. Martinez pulled out a notebook. "Anything else you remember? Any details about her camp, her belongings?" "Nothing specific, just that everything was very orderly. Oh, and she had a notebook, a journal maybe." "We collected her belongings," the detective confirmed. "We'll look through them carefully." He handed Emily a card. "Call me if you think of anything else, or if she contacts you." Why would she contact me? Martinez shrugged. You saved her life. People remember that. As Emily walked back to Shadow, she felt a growing certainty that this wasn't over. Shadow greeted her with enthusiastic tail wagging, as if he approved of her decision to check on the woman they'd found. You started this, buddy, she told him, untying his leash. I hope you know what you're getting us into. Shadow simply wagged his tail harder, his warm brown eyes seeming to say he knew exactly what he was doing. Throughout the afternoon and evening, Emily found herself distracted, unable to focus on work or even the book she tried to read. She kept checking her phone, half expecting a call from Detective Martinez with the news about the mysterious woman. At dinner time, as she filled Shadow's bowl with kibble, she found herself talking to him about the situation, a habit she'd developed living alone. Who do you think she is, Shadow? And what was she running from? Shadow paused in his eating to look up at her, then resumed with enthusiasm. Yeah, you're right. Not our business, Emily sighed. We did our part. But later that night, as she scrolled through local news on her tablet, a small item caught her attention. Unidentified woman found under bridge in critical condition. The brief article mentioned that police were seeking information about the woman's identity. Without thinking, Emily grabbed her phone and took a screenshot, then sent it to Detective Martinez's email address, which had been on his card, to her. Surprise, her phone rang almost immediately. Ms. Reynolds, Detective Martinez here. I was just about to call you. Emily sat up straighter. You were? Has something happened? Our Jane Doe is awake. Not very coherent yet, but the doctors are more optimistic now. And she's been asking for the woman who found her. Apparently, she has a vague memory of you speaking to her under the bridge. Emily felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. Did she say who she is? Or why she was hiding? Not yet. She's still pretty out of it. But I thought you might want to know she's asking about you. Emily hesitated only briefly. Would it be okay if I visited her tomorrow? There was a pause on the other end. Normally, I'd say no to civilian involvement in an ongoing investigation, but in this case, it might help if she sees a familiar face, even if the familiarity is limited. How about tomorrow morning? I can meet you at the hospital at 10. I'll be there, Emily promised. After hanging up, she looked at Shadow, who was watching her from his bed in the corner of the living room. Looks like we're going back to the hospital tomorrow, boy. But you'll have to wait outside again, Shadow responded, with a slow, deliberate blink that Emily chose to interpret as understanding. That night, Emily dreamed of the bridge and the space beneath it. In her dream, Shadow led her down a dark tunnel that seemed to go on forever, his golden fur the only light in the darkness. She awoke with a lingering sense of unease and the certainty that she was being drawn into something bigger than a random act of kindness. The next morning dawned clear and warm. Emily took Shadow for a quick walk, deliberately avoiding the route that would take them past the bridge, then prepared for her hospital visit. She debated what to bring, finally settling on a small potted plant. Flowers seemed too intimate for a stranger, but she didn't want to arrive empty-handed. At the hospital, she again secured Shadow outside with plenty of water and shade, promising not to be long. Detective Martinez was waiting in the lobby as arranged, looking more tired than he had the day before. Rough night? Emily asked as they walked toward the elevators. Spent most of it going through missing persons reports, trying to identify our Jane Doe, he replied. No matches so far for her description within a 100-mile radius, which either means no one's reported her missing, or she came from farther away, Emily finished, or doesn't want to be found. Martinez gave her an appraising look. You'd make a decent detective with that kind of thinking. The elevator doors opened on the 4th floor, and Martinez led the way to a room near the nurse's station. He paused outside the door. A few things you should know. Her condition has improved, but she's still weak. Fever's down, but the infection took a toll. And she's skittish, startles easily. The nurses have noted possible signs of trauma beyond her physical injuries. Emily nodded, clutching the small plant a little tighter. Also, Martinez continued, we've got an officer stationed nearby. Standard procedure when we have an unidentified patient under suspicious circumstances. You think she's in danger? Emily asked, alarmed. I think she believes she is, Martinez replied carefully, and until we know more, we're taking precautions. He knocked softly on the door before pushing it open. Morning, you have a visitor. The woman in the hospital bed looked markedly different from the dirty, feverish person Emily had found beneath the bridge. Her dark hair had been washed and combed, her face cleaned of dirt. IV tubes ran into her arm, and a heart monitor beeped steadily beside the bed. But her eyes, those startling blue eyes, were the same. They widened slightly as Emily entered the room. You, she said, her voice stronger than Emily had expected. You found me. Emily approached the bed, setting the plant on the side table. I'm Emily Reynolds, and yes, though really it was my dog who found you. He sensed something was wrong. A ghost of a smile touched the woman's pale lips. Dogs know things people don't. That's what I've always believed, Emily agreed. How are you feeling? The woman glanced at Martinez, who stood quietly by the door before answering. Better. Thank you for helping me. Can you tell us your name? Martinez asked gently. The woman's expression closed off immediately, wariness replacing the brief openness. I don't remember. Martinez and Emily exchanged glances. It was clearly a lie, but neither called her on it. That's okay, Emily said. The doctor said confusion is normal with high fevers. The woman relaxed slightly, grateful for the cover story. They told me I had an infection from a cut on my leg. Do you remember how you got that cut? Martinez asked. Or how you ended up under that bridge? The woman shook her head, eyes downcast. Everything's fuzzy. Emily noticed the woman's hands fidgeting with the edge of her blanket, a nervous gesture that suggested she remembered more than she was saying. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better, Emily said, deciding to change the subject. I brought you a plant. I thought it might brighten up the room a bit. The woman looked at the small potted succulent with genuine appreciation. It's beautiful, thank you. Martinez's phone buzzed. He checked it, then excused himself. I need to take this. I'll be right outside. When he was gone, the woman's demeanor changed subtly. She leaned forward, speaking in a low, urgent voice. I don't have much time. They'll be looking for me. Emily blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. Who's looking for you? People who want me silenced. Her blue eyes were intense, pleading. I saw something I shouldn't have, something dangerous. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. You should tell the detective. He can help protect you. The woman shook her head vehemently. I don't know who I can trust. These people have connections everywhere. You can trust me, Emily said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. I want to help you. The woman studied Emily's face as if searching for deceit. Finally, she whispered, My name is Sophie Ellington. The name tugged at Emily's memory. Ellington? Why is that familiar? My father is Raymond Ellington. Now Emily placed it. Raymond Ellington was a prominent businessman in the city, real estate mostly, but with fingers in many pies. His company's logo was on several downtown buildings. You're that Sophie Ellington? The one who... Emily stopped herself, remembering the news stories from months ago. Sophie Ellington, daughter of Raymond Ellington, had reportedly left for an extended trip abroad after completing her master's degree. There had been society page photos of a bon voyage party. Sophie's expression confirmed Emily's unspoken thought. Yes, the one who supposedly went to Europe but actually disappeared because she witnessed her father ordering a man's murder. Emily felt like the air had been sucked from the room. Oh my God! Now you understand why I can't trust just anyone, Sophie said. My father has the police, judges, politicians in his pocket. Before Emily could respond, the door opened and Martinez returned. Sophie immediately leaned back against her pillows, resuming her confused patient act. "Everything okay in here?" Martinez asked, glancing between them. "Fine," Emily said quickly. "We were just chatting about my dog." Martinez seemed to accept this. "Ms. Reynolds, would you mind stepping outside for a moment? I have a few more questions for our patient." Emily nodded, giving Sophie what she hoped was a reassuring look before following Martinez into the hallway. "Did she say anything to you when I was gone?" Martinez asked directly, once the door was closed. Emily hesitated, torn between her promise to Sophie and her duty as a citizen. She's scared, says people are looking for her." Martinez's expression didn't change. "Did she give you a name?" Again, Emily hesitated. "Detective, if someone really is after her, how can we be sure she's safe here?" "That's why we have an officer on duty," Martinez replied. "Look, Ms. Reynolds, I understand you feel connected to her because you found her, but this is potentially a serious case. If she's in danger, we need to know who she is to protect her properly." Emily made a decision. "She didn't give me a name, just said she witnessed something she shouldn't have, something dangerous." It wasn't a complete lie. Sophie had said those things. Emily was just omitting the most crucial information. Martinez studied her face for a moment. "All right, thank you for coming in. I think your visit helped her feel more at ease. Can I come back tomorrow?" Emily asked. "I'd like to know how she's doing." "I don't see why not. But call first, just in case there are developments in the case." Emily nodded, thanked him, and headed back to the elevator, her mind racing. Sophie Ellington, daughter of one of the city's most powerful men, claiming to have witnessed a murder ordered by her own father. It seemed incredible, like something from a movie rather than real life. Yet the fear in Sophie's eyes had been genuine, and if what she said was true, she had good reason to be terrified. Outside, Shadow greeted her with his usual enthusiasm, sensing her distraction, but happy to see her nonetheless. Emily knelt beside him, burying her face in his soft golden fur for a moment. "What have we gotten ourselves into, Shadow?" she whispered. The golden retriever licked her cheek, his warm brown eyes steady and reassuring. Emily took a deep breath and stood up. "Come on, boy. We need to do some research." On the walk home, Emily's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for not telling him. I'll explain everything when I can. Be careful." As Emily stared at the message, wondering how Sophie had gotten her number, then realized Martinez must have shared her contact information from the witness statement. Back at her apartment, Emily secured the deadbolt and chain, suddenly aware of potential dangers that hadn't concerned her before. She fed Shadow, then sat at her computer searching for information about Raymond Ellington and his daughter. There were plenty of news articles and society page features. Raymond Ellington, 58, widower, self-made real estate mogul, philanthropist, and major donor to the mayor's campaign. Photos showed a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and cold eyes. Sophie appeared in many of the pictures: charity galas, corporate events, graduation from an Ivy League university. Always standing slightly apart, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. The most recent articles mentioned her departure for an extended European tour following completion of her master's degree in environmental science. Emily found nothing about any controversy or criminal allegations involving Raymond Ellington. On paper, he appeared to be a respected businessman and civic leader. Next, she searched for any recent murders or suspicious deaths in the city. There were several. This was a major urban area after all, but nothing that stood out as connected to Ellington or his business interests. Emily sat back, frustrated. If Sophie was telling the truth, whatever she had witnessed had been covered up well enough to avoid public scrutiny. Shadow pattered over and rested his head on Emily's knee, looking up at her with concerned eyes. "Nobody," she said, scratching behind his ears. "I should probably stay out of this. But if she's really in danger, Her phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. Don't research online. They monitor searches. We'll contact when safe. Emily stared at the message, a chill running through her. Who was they? And how did Sophie know Emily was researching her father? Shadow suddenly lifted his head, ears perked forward, a low growl building in his throat. Emily froze, listening. Had that been a noise at her door? Or just a neighbor in the hallway? It's okay, Shadow, she whispered, though she wasn't convinced herself. She moved cautiously to the door and checked the peephole. The hallway outside her apartment appeared empty. Still, Shadow continued to growl, his hackles raised. Emily checked that all her windows were locked, then drew the blinds. She felt foolish. She'd probably just frightened herself with too many conspiracy theories, but Sophie's fear had been real enough. That night, Emily slept fitfully, Shadow positioned protectively at the foot of her bed. In the morning, she woke to find 3 missed calls on her phone, all from Detective Martinez. As she was about to call him back, the phone rang again. Ms. Reynolds? It's Detective Martinez. We have a situation. Emily sat up, instantly alert. What's happened? Is Sophie? She caught herself. Is the woman from the bridge okay? There was a pause on the other end. So she did tell you her name. Emily closed her eyes, realizing her mistake. Detective, Save it, Martinez cut her off. We know. Who she is now? Sophie Ellington, daughter of Raymond Ellington, and she's missing. Missing? How? You had an officer watching her room. He was called away briefly for an emergency elsewhere in the hospital. When he returned, her room was empty. She somehow managed to disconnect herself from the monitors without setting off alarms. Emily's mind raced. When did this happen? Sometime between 3 and 3:30 this morning. We're reviewing security footage now, but she seems to have known how to avoid the cameras, almost like she'd planned it. Or like she'd had help, Emily thought, remembering the text messages. Had Sophie already been planning her escape when Emily visited? What do you need from me? Emily asked, trying to sound cooperative. I need to know exactly what she told you yesterday, Martinez said firmly. Everything, Mrs. Reynolds. This is now a missing persons case involving a woman in medical distress. Emily hesitated, torn between her instinct to protect Sophie and her duty to help find a potentially vulnerable woman. She told me her name, Emily admitted, and that she was afraid someone was looking for her. She said she witnessed something she shouldn't have. Did she specify what she witnessed, or who was after her? Emily took a deep breath. She said she saw her father order someone's murder. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Martinez spoke, his tone carefully neutral. That's a very serious allegation. I know. I wasn't sure whether to believe it myself. Did she provide any details? Names, dates, locations? No. That's all she told me before you came back into the room. Another pause. Ms. Reynolds, I need you to come down to the station to make a formal statement about this conversation. Am I in trouble for not telling you yesterday? No. But this information could be crucial to finding her and understanding what's going on. Emily agreed to come in, ended the call, and sat staring at her phone. Shadow approached, sensing her distress, and placed his head on her lap. What do I do, Shadow? She murmured, stroking his soft head. If Sophie's telling the truth, she could be in real danger, but if she's not... Her phone buzzed with a text. Don't go to the police. Not safe. Need your help. Meet at the place you found me. Noon today. Come alone. Sis. Emily stared at the message, conflict churning inside her. If she went to meet Sophie, she'd be withholding information from the police in a missing persons case. If she didn't go, Sophie might be left without help she desperately needed. What would you do, boy? She asked Shadow. The golden retriever tilted his head, then walked to the door and sat, looking back at her expectantly. Emily smiled despite herself. You'd go help her, wouldn't you? Even not knowing if she's telling the truth? Shadow wagged his tail once, as if confirming her assessment. All right then, Emily decided. We'll go to the station, tell Martinez what we know, minus the meeting plan, and then figure out What to do about Sophie. At the police station, Emily provided a formal statement about finding Sophie under the bridge and their conversation at the hospital. She described Sophie's fear and her allegation against her father, but said nothing about the text messages or the planned meeting. Detective Martinez listened carefully, occasionally making notes. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Reynolds. This helps establish a clearer picture of what might be going on." "Do you believe her?" Emily asked. About her father, Martinez's expression remained professional. "We investigate facts, not beliefs. At this point, all we know for certain is that Sophie Ellington was found injured and ill under a bridge and has now left the hospital against medical advice." "Have you contacted her father?" "Mr. Ellington has been notified that his daughter has been found. He's on his way to the station now to assist with the investigation." Emily felt a flutter of anxiety. "He's coming here now?" Martinez nodded. "He's naturally concerned about his daughter's well-being." Emily glanced at her watch. It was just after 10:30. "I should go. I have work to get to." "Of course. We'll call if we have any further questions." As Emily stood to leave, Martinez added, "One more thing, Ms. Reynolds. If Sophie contacts you, I'd appreciate it if you'd let me know immediately. Her medical condition alone is cause for concern." "Of course," Emily agreed, avoiding his eyes. In the lobby of the police station, Emily was just about to exit when the doors opened and a distinguished-looking man entered, accompanied by a younger man in an expensive suit. Emily recognized Raymond Ellington immediately from the photos she'd seen online. Tall, imposing, with silver hair and sharp features that might once have been handsome, but now seemed cold and predatory. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to power, barely acknowledging the officers who greeted him. His companion, an assistant or lawyer, Emily guessed, walked half a step behind, carrying a leather portfolio. Emily ducked her head and moved quickly toward the exit, hoping to avoid notice. But as she passed, Ellington's gaze briefly met hers, and she felt a chill despite the warmth of the day. There was something calculating in those eyes, something that made her think perhaps Sophie wasn't being paranoid after all. Outside, Emily hurried to where she'd left Shadow with a volunteer from the station's community outreach program who sometimes watched dogs for people with police business. The young woman smiled as Emily approached. "He's been a perfect gentleman," she said, handing over Shadow's leash. "So well behaved." "Thanks for watching him," Emily replied, kneeling to greet Shadow, who responded with enthusiastic tail wagging. "We've got to go now, don't we, buddy?" Emily checked her watch again. Still over an hour until the meeting time with Sophie. She decided to head home first to gather some supplies and figure out what to do. As she and Shadow walked the 6 blocks to her apartment, Emily couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Twice she stopped abruptly and turned around, but saw nothing suspicious. Shadow seemed unconcerned, trotting happily beside her, which somewhat reassured her. His instincts had proven reliable so far. Back at her apartment, Emily quickly packed a small bag with items she thought might be useful: a first aid kit, a bottle of water, some energy bars, a flashlight, and a portable phone charger. She wasn't sure what Sophie needed, but it seemed wise to be prepared. She also changed into jeans and sturdy shoes, better suited for potentially scrambling down embankments than the business casual outfit she'd worn to the police station. As she got ready, she debated whether to go to the meeting at all. The rational part of her mind insisted this was foolish, potentially dangerous. She barely knew Sophie, had only her word about Raymond Ellington's alleged crimes, and was now considering lying to the police to help her. But every time Emily considered ignoring the meeting, she remembered the genuine fear in Sophie's eyes and Shadow's absolute certainty that something was wrong beneath that bridge. Her dog's instincts had led her to Sophie in the first place. Perhaps she should continue trusting them. At 11:30, Emily clipped Shadow's leash to his collar and headed out. She took a circuitous route to Oak Ridge Park, doubling back several times to ensure no one was following them. The park was busy with the usual weekday crowd. Mothers with strollers, elderly people enjoying the sunshine, office workers taking lunch breaks on benches. Emily and Shadow approached the bridge casually, as if on a normal walk. She scanned the area for police presence, but saw none. Apparently, they weren't expecting Sophie to return to her hiding place. When they reached the bridge, Shadow immediately tensed, ears forward, the same alert posture he'd displayed 2 days earlier. Emily felt her heart rate quicken. "You sense her, don't you?" she whispered. Shadow whined softly in response. Checking that no one was paying particular attention to them, Emily led Shadow down the embankment beside the bridge. The path was steep but manageable, especially now that she wore appropriate footwear. At the bottom, she approached the shadowy space beneath the stone arch cautiously. "Sophie?" she called softly. "It's Emily." And Shadow. For a moment, there was silence, except for the gentle babbling of the creek. Then a voice from the deepest shadows. "You came?" Sophie emerged from behind the stone foundation, looking pale and shaky. She wore hospital scrubs beneath a large sweatshirt that Emily guessed she'd acquired during her escape. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her blue eyes were alert but tired. "I wasn't sure you would," Sophie added, eyeing Shadow with interest. "Is this the hero who found me?" Emily nodded. "This is Shadow. He's the one who knew you were here." Sophie knelt, extending her hand to Shadow, who approached her cautiously, sniffed her fingers, then wagged his tail in apparent approval. "Thank you," she said to the dog, scratching behind his ears. "Sophie, you need to be in the hospital," Emily said. "You were seriously ill." "I'm better now," Sophie insisted, though her pallor suggested otherwise. "The antibiotics helped. I can't risk staying there, not with my father involved." "The detective said your father's at the police station helping with the search for you?" Sophie's laugh was brittle. "I'm sure he is, helping to make sure I'm silenced permanently." Emily hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering her. "Why should I believe you? I know nothing about you except what you've told me." Sophie studied her for a moment, then sat down on a flat rock near the water's edge. "You're right to be suspicious. In your position, I would be too." She gestured for Emily to join her. "I'll tell you everything, and then you can decide whether to help me or turn me in." Emily sat, keeping Shadow close beside her. The golden retriever remained alert, occasionally scanning their surroundings as if standing guard. "My father," Sophie began, "built his fortune in real estate, but that's just the legitimate front. His real business is influence peddling money, laundering, and eliminating anyone who gets in his way." "That's hard to believe," Emily said carefully. "He's a prominent citizen, philanthropist." "All part of the facade," Sophie replied. "I grew up watching him charm the public while terrorizing his employees and family behind closed doors. My mother didn't die of cancer like the newspapers reported. She killed herself after years of his psychological abuse." Emily felt a chill. "I'm sorry. I was away at college when it happened, came back for the funeral, and he had everyone convinced it was a tragic end to a long illness. He's very good at controlling narratives." "What about the murder you mentioned? The one you witnessed?" Sophie's face darkened. 3 months ago, I came home early from a conference. I was supposed to be in Chicago for another day, but a panel was canceled. I went to my father's home office to let him know I was back. The door was ajar and I heard voices." She paused, swallowing hard. "My father was meeting with James Harris, his head of security, and Marcus Levy, a city council member who's always supported my father's development projects. They were discussing someone named David Chen, a journalist who'd been investigating some of my father's overseas investments." "I remember that name," Emily said slowly. "There was a news story. He was killed in a hit and run." Sophie nodded grimly. "It wasn't a hit and run. I heard my father tell Harris to take care of Chen permanently and make it look like an accident. Levy was nervous, saying they needed to be careful that Chen had already gathered too much information." Emily felt her stomach tighten. Did you confront your father? God, no. I knew better than that. I slipped away before they realized I was there. But my father must have suspected something, because the next day he asked very pointed questions. About my conference schedule, commented that I seemed distracted. So you ran. Not immediately. I spent a week gathering what evidence I could. Photographs of meetings between my father and people he shouldn't have been meeting with. Copies of emails I could access. Then I packed a bag, emptied my personal bank account, and disappeared. Why not go to the police, Emily asked. Or the FBI? Sophie's expression hardened. My father has the police chief in his pocket, the mayor, half the judges in the city. I needed hard evidence before approaching federal authorities, and I hadn't found it yet. What were you doing under that bridge? Why not leave town entirely? I was planning to, Sophie explained. I've been moving around, staying in cheap motels, youth hostels, occasionally rough camping when money got tight. I came back to the city to retrieve something I'd hidden, a key piece of evidence. But I got recognized by one of my father's security people. In escaping, I cut my leg climbing a fence. Couldn't risk going to a hospital, so I treated it myself, but it got infected. Emily considered all this, trying to decide whether Sophie's story rang true. It seemed fantastical, like something from a crime thriller rather than real life. And yet, the fear in Sophie's eyes was genuine. The careful way she'd set up her hidden camp beneath the bridge spoke of someone accustomed to watching her back. "What do you need from me?" Emily finally asked. Relief flooded Sophie's face. "You believe me?" "I'm not sure yet, but Shadow seems to trust you, and that counts for something." Emily smiled slightly. "He's a good judge of character." Sophie glanced at the golden retriever, who had settled between them, alert but relaxed. "Smart dog. So what's your plan, and how can I help?" "I need to retrieve the evidence I hid, then get out of town," Sophie explained. "I have a contact in the FBI's white-collar crime division in another state. Once I'm safely away, I'll turn everything over to them. And the evidence is a flash drive containing financial records that prove my father's connections to organized crime, plus audio recordings of conversations I managed to capture after I became suspicious of his activities. I hid it in a place he'd never think to. Look, where?" Sophie hesitated. "I'd rather not say yet, just in case. Well, the less you know, the safer you are." Emily nodded, understanding the logic, even as she felt a twinge of concern about what she might be getting herself into. "What do you need me to do?" "I need a place to hide for a day or two while I recover my strength, then help accessing the location where I hid the evidence. After that, I'll disappear, and you can go back to your normal life." "You want to stay?" "At my apartment?" Emily asked, surprised. "It would be the safest option. My father's people are watching hotels, bus stations, anywhere I might turn up. They'd never think to look for me with a random woman who found me under a bridge." Emily thought about it. Having Sophie in her home would make her an active participant in whatever was happening, potentially putting her at risk. On the other hand, if Sophie was telling the truth, turning her away could essentially be condemning her to death. Shadow nudged Emily's hand with his nose, as if offering his opinion. Emily scratched his ears absently while she considered. "All right," she finally said, "you can stay with me temporarily, but if I see any sign that you're lying or putting me in danger, the deal's off." Sophie's relief was palpable. "Thank you. I promise, once this is over, you'll never have to see me again." "We'll need to be careful getting you to my place," Emily said, already thinking through the logistics. "If your father's people are watching for you, they might notice us together." "I have an idea about that," Sophie said. "Do you think Shadow would let me borrow his leash?" Emily raised an eyebrow questioningly. "If I walk with the dog, hood up, head down, I'll just look like someone walking their pet. You can follow at a distance, and we'll meet at your apartment. Less suspicious than us, walking together." It was a smart suggestion. Emily unclipped Shadow's leash and handed it to Sophie. He's very well behaved on walks. Just don't let him approach other dogs without asking their owners first. Sophie nodded, taking the leash. Shadow looked between the two women, seemingly confused by the change in handlers. "It's okay, Shadow," Emily reassured him. "Go with Sophie. I'll be right behind you." To Emily's surprise, Shadow accepted the new arrangement without protest, standing calmly as Sophie clipped the leash to his collar. "Take River Street," Emily instructed. "My building is the red brick one at the corner of River and Elm, apartment 3B. I'll text you when I'm behind you so you know when to start walking." Sophie nodded, pulling up her hood. "Thank you for this. I know it's a lot to ask of a stranger." "Just don't make me regret it," Emily replied, not unkindly. They worked out final details of their plan. Then Emily climbed back up the embankment to the park path. She walked a good distance away, then found a bench where she could observe the bridge without being obvious about it. She sent a text to Sophie's number, then watched as a hooded figure emerged from beneath the bridge. A few minutes later, a golden retriever trotting obediently alongside. To anyone observing, it would just look like someone walking their dog. Emily waited until Sophie and Shadow were well ahead before following at a distance. She took a parallel street for part of the way, cutting back to River Street only when they were close to her apartment building. She arrived to find Sophie and Shadow waiting in the small side alley next to the building. Shadow greeted Emily enthusiastically, as if they'd been separated for days rather than minutes. "Anyone follow?" "You?" Emily asked quietly. Sophie shook her head. "I don't think so. I was careful." They entered through the side door, avoiding the main lobby where they might be seen by other residents. In the elevator, Emily noticed Sophie leaning against the wall, fatigue evident in her posture. "You really should see a doctor," Emily said. "That infection could come back." "I'll be fine," Sophie insisted. "I just need rest and to finish the antibiotics I took from the hospital." In her apartment, Emily secured the deadbolt and chain behind them, then drew the blinds. Shadow immediately went to his water bowl, drinking deeply after their walk. "Make yourself at home," Emily said, gesturing to the modest living space. "Bathroom's through there if you want to clean up. Are you hungry?" Sophie nodded, sinking onto Emily's couch with visible relief. "Starving. Hospital food wasn't exactly gourmet, and I haven't had a chance to eat since I left." Emily headed to the kitchen to prepare sandwiches, her mind racing with the implications of what she'd done. She was now harboring a fugitive, not from the law exactly, but from a potentially dangerous situation she barely understood as she gathered bread, turkey, and cheese. She heard her phone buzz with an incoming call. Checking the screen, she saw Detective Martinez's number. Her heart raced as she debated whether to answer. "Everything okay?" Sophie called from the living room. "Oh, fine," Emily replied, deciding to take the call. If she ignored it, Martinez might become suspicious. "Just work stuff. Be right there." She stepped into her bedroom and closed the door before answering. "Hello? Ms. Reynolds, Detective Martinez. Here, just following up on our conversation this morning." Emily tried to keep her voice casual. "Yes, Detective. Has there been any progress finding Sophie?" "Not yet. But I wanted to let you know that we've been looking into her allegations against her father." Emily's pulse quickened. "And?" "Preliminary. Investigation hasn't turned up any evidence supporting her claims. In fact, Mr. Ellington has provided medical records indicating his daughter has a history of paranoid delusions during times of stress." Emily frowned. "Medical records?" "Yes. Apparently, she's had episodes like this before. Becomes convinced. People are after her, makes accusations against family members or associates. She's been in treatment on and off for years." This didn't match the Sophie Emily had met, the articulate, organized young woman who had created a neat, methodical camp beneath the bridge. But then, Emily was hardly a mental health professional. "I see," she said carefully. "That's concerning." It is, which is why finding her quickly is even more important. She needs medical attention, not just for her physical condition, but her psychological state as well. Of course, Emily agreed. I'll definitely call if I hear from her. One more thing, Martinez added. Mr. Ellington is offering a substantial reward for information leading to his daughter's safe return. He's very worried about her. Emily's free hand clenched into a fist. Was this a bribe? Or was Raymond Ellington genuinely concerned about his daughter? I'm not interested in rewards, she said, perhaps more sharply than intended. I just want to make sure she's safe. Understood. We all want the same thing, Mrs. Reynolds. After ending the call, Emily stood in her bedroom trying to process this new information. Was Sophie delusional? Had Emily just invited a mentally unstable woman into her home based on elaborate conspiracy theories? Or was Raymond Ellington manufacturing evidence of mental illness to discredit his daughter's claims? Emily returned to the living room with the sandwiches to find Sophie sitting on the floor playing with Shadow. The golden retriever had brought Sophie his favorite toy, a well-worn stuffed duck, and was now engaged in a gentle game of tug-of-war. The scene was so normal, so at odds with the dark tale Sophie had shared, that Emily hesitated in the doorway. Who was that? Sophie asked, looking up. Her expression changed as she registered Emily's face. What's wrong? Emily set the sandwiches on the coffee table and sat down. That was Detective Martinez. He says they're looking into your allegations. Sophie's face hardened. And let me guess, my father has provided them with extensive documentation of my mental health issues? Emily nodded, surprised. How did you know? Because it's his standard playbook. Sophie released the duck, and Shadow trotted away victoriously with his prize. Anytime I've tried to confront him or threaten his operations, he pulls out the troubled daughter narrative. He's got a psychiatrist on his payroll who's created a completely fictional history of paranoid delusions. Is there any truth to it at all? Emily asked directly. Sophie met her gaze steadily. I went to therapy in college to deal with the aftermath of my mother's suicide and my father's emotional abuse. He somehow got access to those records and has been distorting them ever since. She leaned forward. Emily, I know how this sounds. If I were you, I'd be skeptical too, but I'm not imagining this. My father is dangerous, and if he finds me before I can secure that evidence, I'm dead. Emily studied Sophie's face, looking for signs of deception or instability. What she saw instead was exhaustion, fear, and a quiet determination that spoke of someone fighting against terrible odds. Beside them, Shadow had returned with his duck, dropping it in Sophie's lap as if offering a gift. Sophie smiled faintly, scratching the dog's ears. He really likes you, Emily observed. Animals are good judges of character, Sophie said. Better than people, usually. Emily thought about Shadow's behavior, his instant alertness at the bridge, his easy acceptance of Sophie despite her disheveled state. Her dog had never steered her wrong before. Okay, Emily said finally, I believe you, but we need a plan, and we need to be careful. If your father is as powerful and dangerous as you say, we can't afford any mistakes. Relief washed over Sophie's face. Thank you. You have no idea what it means to have someone finally believe me. They ate their sandwiches while discussing next steps. Sophie needed to rest and regain her strength. Then, once she felt better, they would retrieve the hidden evidence. Where exactly is this flash drive? Emily asked again. Sophie hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. It's in a waterproof case, hidden in one of the decorative planters outside my father's office building. Emily blinked in surprise. You hid it at your father's building? Isn't that incredibly risky? Exactly why he'd never think to look there, Sophie explained. It's hiding in plain sight. Plus, I volunteered with the building's sustainability committee last year and helped design those planters. I know exactly how they're constructed and where a small object can be concealed. How do we get to it? Won't there be security? There is, but I know their routines and I still have an access card. We'll need to go late at night when the building is mostly empty. I can't go alone. I'm too weak right now. And if something goes wrong, I need backup. Emily nodded slowly, trying to ignore the voice in her head, pointing out how many laws they might be breaking. "Okay, you rest today and tomorrow. We'll go tomorrow night if you're feeling stronger." Sophie agreed, her eyelids already drooping with fatigue. Emily found spare blankets and a pillow, making up the couch as a bed. Shadow positioned himself protectively nearby as Sophie lay down. "Get some sleep," Emily said. "You're safe here for now?" As Sophie drifted off, Emily stepped out onto her small balcony, needing fresh air and time to think. She hadn't asked for any of this. 2 days ago, her biggest concern had been meeting a work deadline and whether to adopt a second dog as a companion for Shadow. Now she was harboring a woman who claimed her powerful father was a murderer, potentially making herself a target in the process. Had she lost her mind? Shadow joined her on the balcony, pressing against her leg in silent support. Emily looked down at him, remembering how he had refused to move on that bridge, his canine instincts insisting that something important lay beneath. "I hope you know what you're doing, buddy," she murmured, "because I'm really not sure that I do." The next day passed tensely. Emily called in sick to work, unwilling to leave Sophie alone in her apartment. They kept the blinds drawn and spoke in low voices, as if Raymond Ellington's men might be listening outside the door. Shadow seemed to pick up on their anxiety, staying close and alert, occasionally going to the window to peer through the edge of the blinds. Sophie slept most of the morning, waking around noon looking somewhat stronger. She showered and changed into clothes Emily had loaned her, jeans that were slightly too short, and a plain t-shirt that hung loose on her slender frame. They ate lunch while Sophie sketched a rough diagram of her father's office building, explaining security protocols and pointing out cameras they would need to avoid. "There's a service entrance on the west side," she said, drawing an X on her sketch. "Deliveries only during the day, but at night it's minimally monitored. My access card will get us in there." "Won't they have deactivated your card?" Emily asked. Sophie shook her head. "My father never officially reported me missing. As far as the company's systems are concerned, I've been on an approved leave of absence. My card should still work." As evening approached, they prepared for the mission. Emily changed into dark jeans and a black hoodie. Sophie, still in Emily's borrowed clothes, had recovered enough that her face showed some color again, though. She still moved carefully, clearly not at full strength. "What about Shadow?" Emily asked, looking at her dog. "We can't leave him here alone all night, but we can't take him with us either." Sophie considered this. Actually, he might be useful. A woman walking her dog late at night isn't unusual or suspicious, and his senses could alert us to security guards before we see them. Emily hesitated, worried about putting Shadow in danger. But the golden retriever wagged his tail at the mention of going out, apparently eager for adventure. "All right," she conceded. "But at the first sign of trouble, we all leave immediately. No heroics." They waited until just after midnight before setting out. The streets were mostly empty as they made their way toward downtown, where Ellington Tower stood among the city's other skyscrapers. Shadow walked calmly between them, occasionally stopping to sniff at something interesting, but generally staying focused on their unusual midnight journey. As they approached the business district, more caution was needed. They kept to side streets, avoided well-lit areas, and paused frequently to ensure no one was following them. Emily felt like she'd stepped into a spy movie, complete with the absurd sense that she didn't belong in this cloak and dagger world. Finally, they reached a position where they could observe Ellington Tower from half a block away. The 50-story building was dark except for security lighting in the lobby and the occasional illuminated office where cleaning crews worked late. "See the planters?" Sophie whispered, pointing to a series of large decorative containers flanking the building's west entrance. "The evidence is in the third one from the left, hidden in a compartment behind the drainage rocks." Emily nodded, studying the area. A single security guard was visible in the lobby, sitting at a desk near the main entrance. The service entrance Sophie had mentioned was around the corner, out of sight from their position. "Ready?" Sophie asked. Emily took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." They circled the block, approaching the building from the west side. The service entrance was exactly where Sophie had described, a loading dock with a personnel door beside it. Sophie led them to the door and swiped her access card. To Emily's relief, the light turned green, and the lock clicked open. "Toll. You," Sophie whispered with a small smile. Shadow followed them inside, his nails clicking softly on the polished concrete floor. They were in a utilitarian corridor that presumably led to the building's service areas, maintenance, deliveries, garbage disposal. "This way," Sophie said, moving confidently through the dimly lit passage. "We'll take the service elevator to the lobby level, then circle around to where the planters are. There's a maintenance door that leads directly outside." They moved as quietly as possible, shadow padding silently now on the carpeted floor of a staff break room they crossed through. At one point, the golden retriever suddenly stopped, ears perked forward. "What is it, boy?" Emily whispered. Shadow turned his head toward a door they were about to pass. Seconds later, they heard voices approaching from the other side. "Cleaning crew," Sophie mouthed, pulling Emily and Shadow into an alcove containing a water fountain and vending machines. They pressed themselves against the wall as the door opened, and two uniformed workers emerged, pushing a cart loaded with cleaning supplies. The workers passed within feet of their hiding place, chatting about a sports game and completely unaware of the intruders. When the cleaners had disappeared down another corridor, Sophie exhaled. "Good call, Shadow," she whispered, patting the dog's head. They continued their cautious progress through the building, following Sophie's lead. Finally, they reached a door-marked maintenance exit. "The planters are just outside," Sophie said. "I'll get the flash drive. You and Shadow keep watch." Emily nodded, and Sophie eased the door open, checking that the area was clear before stepping outside. Emily and Shadow remained in the doorway, watching as Sophie approached the third planter. The night air was cool and still, the street eerily quiet without its usual daytime bustle. Sophie knelt beside the planter, her hands working quickly to move decorative rocks and access a hidden compartment in the structure. Emily watched nervously, expecting security guards or police to appear at any moment. Suddenly, Shadow growled softly, the same alert sound he'd made when sensing something beneath the bridge. Emily tensed, scanning the area. "Sophie," she hissed, "I think someone's coming." Sophie looked up, her hand still buried in the planter. "I've almost got it, just a few more seconds." Emily strained to see in the dimness. Had that been movement in the shadows across the street, or just her imagination? Shadow's growl deepened, his body stiffening beside her. "Sophie now," Emily urged. "Got it," Sophie whispered triumphantly, holding up a small waterproof case. She quickly rearranged the rocks to hide any evidence of tampering, then hurried back to where Emily and Shadow waited. Just as Sophie reached the door, a beam of light swept across the area, a security guard with a flashlight making rounds. "Inside, quick," Emily whispered, pulling Sophie through the door as the light moved closer. They closed the door as quietly as possible, hearing the guard's footsteps approaching outside. Had he seen the door closing? Would he investigate? Shadow's ears were still alert, his attention fixed on the door. The three of them stood frozen, barely breathing, as the footsteps paused just outside. Emily's heart pounded so loudly she was sure it must be audible. Beside her, Sophie clutched the waterproof case containing the flash drive, her knuckles white. The handle of the door began to turn. Emily grabbed Sophie's arm and pulled her away from the door, frantically looking for somewhere to hide. There was nothing, just a bare maintenance corridor with closed doors on either side. They'd be spotted instantly if the guard came in. In that moment of panic, Shadow took action. He began barking loudly, racing down the corridor away from the door, his nails clicking on the hard floor. "Shadow." "No," Emily whispered, but it was too late. The door opened, and the beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness. Instead of catching Emily and Sophie in its glare, however, the light followed the sound of Shadow's barking, which was already fading, as he ran deeper into the building. "What the hell?" the security guard muttered, stepping inside. "How'd a dog get in here?" The guard moved past them, following Shadow's distraction. Emily and Sophie pressed themselves against the wall, hardly daring to breathe as he passed. Once he was several yards away, Emily tugged Sophie's sleeve and they slipped through the still-open door to the outside. "Shadow," Emily whispered urgently, once they were clear. "We can't leave him. He'll find us," Sophie assured her. "He's smart. Right now we need to move." They hurried away from the building, keeping to the shadows. Emily's heart was still racing, torn between the need to escape and fear for her dog. They ducked into an alley half a block away, pressing themselves against the wall as a security vehicle cruised slowly past the front of Ellington Tower. "They're responding to the disturbance," Sophie whispered. "Standard procedure. They'll search the building, call it in." "We need to find Shadow," Emily insisted. Sophie nodded. "We will, but we need to be smart about it." They waited, watching as another security guard emerged from the building and spoke with the one in the vehicle. Emily strained to see if there was any sign of Shadow, but from this distance, it was impossible to tell. "There," Sophie suddenly whispered, pointing. Emily followed her gaze and nearly cried with relief. Shadow was trotting along the sidewalk on the opposite side of the street, head high, moving with purpose but not running. Just a dog out for a walk, nothing suspicious. Emily wanted to call out to him but knew that would draw attention. Instead, she let out a soft, distinctive whistle, their signal for "come" during off-leash park time. Shadow's ears perked up. He paused, looking around, then spotted them in the alley. Without hesitation, he changed direction, crossing the street when the security guards weren't looking, and slipped into the alley to join them. "Good boy," Emily whispered, kneeling to embrace him. "So smart, so brave." Shadow wagged his tail, seemingly pleased with himself and unperturbed by the danger they just faced. "We need to keep moving," Sophie urged. "They'll be checking the security cameras soon, might see us." They moved deeper into the alley, which connected to a network of service lanes behind the business district's buildings. Sophie led the way confidently, despite her still weakened state, guiding them through a maze of back streets that eventually brought them to a small park several blocks from Ellington Tower. "We should be safe here for a moment," Sophie said, sinking onto a bench. Despite her brave front, Emily could see she was exhausted, her face pale in the streetlight. "Are you okay?" Emily asked. Sophie nodded, pulling the waterproof case from her pocket. "We got it. That's what matters." "What exactly is on that flash drive?" "Financial records showing my father's company laundering money for organized crime. Emails discussing bribes to city officials. And the audio file I managed to record of the conversation about David Chen." Sophie tucked the case back into her pocket. "Enough to put my father away for a long time. If I can get it to the right people." "And who are the right people?" "I have a contact in the FBI's white-collar crime division in Chicago. Someone who doesn't have connections to my father. I need to get this to him personally." Emily nodded, absently stroking Shadow's head as he sat alertly beside the bench. "So what's next?" Before Sophie could answer, Shadow suddenly stiffened, a low growl building in his throat. Emily and Sophie both tensed, looking around the seemingly empty park. "We need to go," Emily whispered. "Now." They rose quickly, moving toward the far side of the park. Behind them, Emily heard the sound of a car pulling up to the curb, doors opening. "Don't look back," Sophie hissed. "Just walk normally." They picked up their pace, Shadow moving protectively between them. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. Were they being followed? Or was this just paranoia fueled by the night's events? Sophie Ellington. The male voice rang out across the park, answering her question. Sophie grabbed Emily's arm. "Run," she said simply. They broke into a sprint, Shadow bounding alongside them. Behind them, footsteps pounded on the pavement, at least 2 people. In pursuit! They raced across the park toward the street beyond, where apartment buildings offered the possibility of more hiding places. Emily was grateful for all the morning runs she'd taken with Shadow. her body responding automatically to the need for speed. Sophie, however, was struggling. Still weak from her illness, she began to fall behind. Emily grabbed her hand, pulling her along. "Come on," she urged. "We're almost there." They reached the street and turned right, running past closed shops and darkened cafes. Shadow kept pace easily, occasionally looking back at their pursuers. "There," Sophie gasped, pointing to an alley between buildings. "Service stairs. To the roof. They connect buildings." Emily understood immediately. They could lose their pursuers by crossing between buildings via the rooftops. They ducked into the alley, finding the metal service stairs Sophie had indicated. Emily practically pushed Sophie up ahead of her, Shadow bounding up behind them. The stairs were noisy, their footsteps echoing in the narrow space, but there was no help for it. They climbed as quickly as possible, reaching a landing halfway up just as voices entered the alley below. "They went up here." Sophie stumbled on the next flight, her weakened legs giving out. Emily caught her, supporting her weight. "Just a little farther," she encouraged. "You can do this." Somehow, they made it to the roof, emerging onto a flat expanse dotted with ventilation equipment and water tanks. Shadow stayed close, his hackles raised as he sensed the danger behind them. "Security from my father's company." The tall one was Marcus Reed, Harris's second-in-command. The other one I didn't recognize. Sophie closed her eyes briefly. "They were armed, Emily. These aren't security guards playing tough. They're killers." Emily felt a chill run through her. The reality of their situation was sinking in. This wasn't a game or an adventure. They were in genuine danger. Maria brought coffee and a bowl of water for Shadow, along with a plate of toast she hadn't ordered. "On the house," she said with a wink. "You all look like you need it." When she'd gone, Emily leaned forward. "We can't go back to my apartment right away. They might be watching it," Sophie nodded. "We need to get separated. You didn't sign up for this level of danger. Take Shadow and go somewhere safe. A friend's place, a hotel. I'll make my own way to Chicago." "No," Emily said firmly. "You're in no condition to travel alone, and besides, they've seen me now. I'm already involved," which is exactly what I was trying to avoid, Sophie said miserably. "I never meant to put you in danger." "Well, we're in it now, together." Emily took a sip of her coffee, thinking. "I have a friend who owns a cabin about an hour outside the city. We could go there, regroup, figure out our next move." Sophie hesitated. "Your friend won't ask questions?" "She's out of the country for 3 months. Ecological research in Costa Rica. She gave me a key to check on the place occasionally." Emily managed a small smile. "She's very trusting." They finished their coffee in silence, each lost in thought. Shadow remained alert beneath the table, occasionally raising his head when the diner's door opened, checking each new arrival. Emily used the diner's phone to call a cab, safer than using their cell phones, which might be tracked. While they waited, she tried to clean up their appearance as best she could in the bathroom, washing the grime from their faces and hands. The cab arrived 20 minutes later. They directed the driver to a shopping center a few miles from her friend's cabin, not wanting to reveal their actual destination. From there, they walked the remaining distance, keeping to side roads and watching carefully for any signs of pursuit. The cabin, when they finally reached it, was exactly what they needed: isolated, comfortable, and secure. Emily unlocked the doctor and did a quick check of the interior while Sophie waited outside with Shadow. "All clear," she called softly. Sophie practically stumbled inside, her last reserves of energy depleted. Shadow followed, immediately beginning a thorough inspection of the new space, sniffing every corner. Emily locked and bolted the door, then drew the curtains over all the windows. Only then did she allow herself to exhale, some of the tension draining from her body. "We made it," she said. Sophie had already sunk onto the couch, the waterproof case clutched in her hand. "For now," she replied, "but we're not safe yet. Not until this evidence is in the right hands." Emily nodded, accepting the truth of this. They had escaped immediate danger, but Raymond Ellington's reach was long. They needed a plan to get Sophie and her evidence to Chicago safely. Shadow, having completed his inspection of the cabin, came to sit beside Sophie, resting his head on her knee as if offering comfort. Sophie smiled faintly, stroking his soft golden fur. "Your dog is amazing," she said quietly. "He saved us tonight. Twice." Emily looked at Shadow with pride and wonder. The golden retriever who had once been abandoned and left to starve had become not just a pet but a protector, a hero in his own right. "He's always known things I don't," Emily replied. "From the moment he refused to move on that bridge, he's been one step ahead of us." They fell silent, exhaustion finally catching up with them. Outside, the first hints of dawn were appearing on the horizon, pale light filtering through the trees, surrounding the cabin. "We should get some rest," Emily said. "We can figure out our next steps in the morning." Sophie nodded, her eyelids already drooping. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything. Most people would have walked away a long time ago." Emily thought about that as she found blankets for Sophie and settled her on the couch. Would most people have walked away? Perhaps. But from the moment Shadow had sensed something wrong beneath that bridge, Emily had felt connected to whatever was happening. Drawn into Sophie's story by forces she couldn't quite explain, she made up a bed for herself on the floor nearby, Shadow curling up between them as if determined to keep them both safe. Despite the danger they were in, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, Emily felt an odd sense of peace as she drifted toward it. Sleep. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Emily, Sophie, and the golden retriever who had brought them into each other's lives. Emily woke to the sound of typing. She blinked, momentarily disoriented in the unfamiliar surroundings, then remembered the cabin, the escape, the men with guns. She sat up quickly, looking for Sophie. The young woman was at the small dining table, her face illuminated by the glow of a laptop Emily hadn't noticed the night before. "Where did that come from?" Emily asked, her voice thick with sleep. Sophie glanced up. "My emergency pack. I hid it here months ago, the first time I used this place as a safe house." Emily stared at her. "You've been here before?" Sophie nodded. "I spent a week here in July. Broke in, I'm afraid. It seemed abandoned at the time. That's when my friend left for Costa Rica," Emily said, processing this coincidence. "So when I suggested this place, I already knew it was safe," Sophie name confirmed. "Fate has a strange way of connecting dots, doesn't it?" Emily looked down at Shadow, still sleeping peacefully beside her makeshift bed. "Or maybe not so strange," she murmured, wondering if the golden retriever had somehow sensed Sophie's previous presence here. She stood, stretching stiff muscles, and moved to join Sophie at the table. "What are you doing?" "Examining the evidence," Sophie replied, turning the screen so Emily could see. "Making sure it's all here before we risk trying to get it to Chicago." The laptop displayed a complex spreadsheet of financial transactions, dates, amounts, account numbers, company names. To Emily, it looked like gibberish, but Sophie's expression was grimly satisfied. "This proves everything," she said. "Money moving from known criminal enterprises through shell companies and into my father's development projects. Bribery payments to city officials disguised as consulting fees. All of it." She clicked to another file, an audio recording. "And this is the conversation I overheard about David Chen." Sophie pressed play, and a man's voice filled the small cabin, deep, authoritative, chillingly casual. "Chen is becoming a problem. He's asking too many questions about the harbor project." Another voice responded, deferential but tense. "We've tried the usual channels, threatening his editor, offering him money to back off. He's not responding." Then, "We need a more permanent solution," the first voice said. "To make it look like an accident. A mugging gone wrong, a hit and run. Something clean that won't raise questions." "You want me to take care of it personally, Mr. Ellington?" "Yes, Harris. I trust your discretion. Just make sure it happens before the council vote next week." Sophie stopped the recording, her face pale but determined. "That's my father and James Harris, his head of security. 3 days later, David Chen was killed in what police called a hit and run. Emily felt sick. The casual way Raymond Ellington had ordered a man's death was chilling. This wasn't a paranoid fantasy. It was cold, calculated murder. "This is overwhelming," Emily said quietly. "We need to get this to the authorities right away." Sophie nodded. "My contact in the Chicago FBI office is expecting me. I emailed him this morning using a secure connection. He'll meet us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Tomorrow? In Chicago? Emily's mind raced. That's a 6-hour drive at least. And they're looking for us. 7 hours to be safe, Sophie corrected. And yes, they are. But they're looking for 2 women and a golden retriever. We need to change that equation. Emily raised an eyebrow. How? I have some supplies in my emergency pack. Hair dye, different clothes. And I've been thinking about Shadow. The golden retriever, hearing his name, raised his head sleepily. We could temporarily dye his fur, Sophie suggested. Not completely, just patches to make him look like a different dog. It's safe, non-toxic. Washes out in a few days. Emily wasn't sure how she felt about that idea, but she had to admit it made strategic sense. Shadow's distinctive golden coat was easily recognizable. What about transportation? She asked. My car is back at my apartment. We can't risk going there. There's a used car lot about 3 miles from here, Sophie said. Cash only, no questions asked. Not exactly legal, but effective. Emily shook her head, amazed. You've really thought of everything. When you're on the run from someone like my father, you learn to plan for contingencies. Sophie's expression turned serious. But Emily, I want to be clear about something. This is your last chance to walk away. I can handle things from here. You could call a cab, go back to your life. Say I manipulated or threatened you if anyone asks. Emily considered this offer. It was tempting in a way. To return to her normal life, her job, her apartment. To pretend none of this had happened. But then she looked at Shadow, now fully awake and watching her attentively, as if waiting for her decision. The golden retriever who had refused to move on that bridge, who had led her to Sophie in the first place. Somehow Emily knew this was where she was meant to be. No, she said firmly, we started this together. We'll finish it together. Relief flooded Sophie's face. Thank you, she said simply. They spent the morning preparing for their journey. Sophie had indeed come prepared. Her emergency pack contained not just the laptop, but clothing, cash, hair dye, and even a temporary coloring rinse for dogs that she'd bought months ago as part of her contingency planning. Emily's light blonde hair was transformed to a rich auburn, while Sophie's dark locks became a striking platinum blonde. Shadow endured his makeover with surprising patience, allowing them to add irregular brown patches to his golden coat, making him look like a mixed-breed dog rather than a purebred retriever. Now, for the final touch, Sophie said, pulling out a pair of non-prescription glasses for Emily and a baseball cap for herself. Different enough to not match descriptions, but not so different that we look like we're in disguise. By early afternoon, they were ready. They hiked to the used car lot Sophie had mentioned, where a dubious-looking man sold them an older model sedan for cash, no paperwork required. Emily chose not to think too hard about the legality of the transaction, with Sophie navigating and Shadow in the back seat, looking decidedly unimpressed with his new spotted appearance. They set out for Chicago. They stuck to back roads where possible, avoiding major highways where state police might be watching for them. How did you become so good at all this? Emily asked, after they'd been driving for a couple of hours. The planning, the disguises, staying off the grid. Sophie gazed out the window at the passing landscape. Necessity, she said quietly. When I first realized what my father was involved in, I tried to ignore it, convinced myself it wasn't my problem. But after my mother died, after I found out the truth about that, I knew I couldn't look away anymore. What was the truth? Emily asked gently. The official story was cancer. What really happened was that she threatened to expose my father's criminal connections during their divorce. He had her committed to a psychiatric facility, discredited her with the same mental illness narrative he's using on me now. 3 weeks later, she was dead. Suicide, they said. Sophie's voice was flat, as if she'd exhausted all emotion on the subject long ago. I don't believe it was suicide. I can't prove it, but I believe he had her killed. That's when I started. Planning, learning skills, creating emergency caches, preparing for the day I'd have enough evidence to bring him down. Emily drove in silence for a moment, processing this. "I'm sorry about your mother," she finally said. "Thank you." Sophie managed a small, sad smile. She would have liked you, and she would have loved Shadow. At the mention of his name, the golden retriever whined softly from the back seat as if offering his own condolences. They drove through the afternoon and into the evening, stopping only for fuel and quick meals at drive-thrus. As night fell, they took turns at the wheel, one sleeping while the other drove. Shadow remained vigilant throughout, occasionally growling softly when police cars passed, as if he understood the need for caution. They reached the outskirts of Chicago just after dawn, exhausted but triumphant. They found a budget motel where they could rest before the meeting with Sophie's FBI contact, paying cash and registering under false names. In the small, shabby room, Sophie set up her laptop, one final time copying the evidence onto a second flash drive as backup. "Just in case," she explained. Emily sat on one of the twin beds, Shadow beside her, watching as Sophie meticulously organized the files. "What happens after tomorrow?" Emily asked. "After you hand over the evidence?" Sophie looked up from the computer. "Witness protection, probably. A new identity, a new life somewhere far from here." "You'd never be able to come back," Emily realized. "Never see your friends again." "What friend?" Sophie said with a bitter laugh. "My father made sure I was isolated, dependent on him. The few friends I had believed his stories about my mental health issues when I tried to tell them the truth." She shook her head. "There's nothing for me to come back to." Emily felt a wave of sadness for this young woman who had lost everything in her quest for justice. Shadow seemed to sense it too, jumping down from the bed to go sit beside Sophie, resting his head on her knee in that comforting way he had. Sophie smiled, scratching behind his ears. "I'll miss you too, though," she admitted. "You've been better friends to me in a few days than anyone has in years." Emily was about to respond when her phone, which she'd kept turned off for security, suddenly buzzed with an incoming text. She frowned, picking it up. "Who has this number?" Sophie asked sharply. "Just a few people," Emily said, checking the screen. "It's from Detective Martinez." Sophie tensed. "What does it say?" Emily read the message aloud. "Need to speak with you urgently regarding Sophie Ellington. Evidence has emerged supporting her claims. Call secure line immediately." A phone number followed. "It's a trap," Sophie said instantly. "My father's trying to locate us." Emily wasn't so sure. Maybe Martinez has been investigating independently, found something that corroborates your story." "We can't risk it," Sophie insisted. "Not when we're so close. 12 more hours, and we'll have delivered the evidence safely." Emily nodded, putting the phone down without responding to the text. But a seed of doubt had been planted. What if Martinez really had found something? What if they were running from potential allies? They decided to take shifts sleeping. One, always awake and on guard. Emily took the first watch, sitting by the window with the curtain cracked just enough to see the parking lot. Shadow lay at her feet, occasionally raising his head when cars pulled in or out. The golden retriever had been the catalyst for everything that had happened, Emily reflected. His refusal to move on that bridge had changed the course of multiple lives. Whatever sense or instinct had led him to, Sophie had set in motion events that might bring down a powerful criminal and avenge a murdered journalist. Around noon, they prepared to leave for the meeting with Sophie's FBI contact. The rendezvous point was a public library downtown, safe, crowded with multiple exits. As they were gathering their few belongings, Shadow suddenly went on alert, growling softly at the door. Emily and Sophie froze, exchanging alarmed glances. "Someone's out there," Emily whispered. Sophie nodded, quickly pocketing both flash drives and moving away from the door. Emily joined her, pulling Shadow back as well. A knock came, 3 short raps. They remained silent, hardly breathing. "Ms. Reynolds? Sophie?" A familiar voice called softly. "It's Detective Martinez. I'm alone. We need to talk." Sophie shook her head frantically, but Emily hesitated. Something about the detective's tone seemed genuine. "How did you find us?" Emily called through the door. "Followed the security footage from Ellington Tower. Saw you escape with the dog. Figured you'd head for Chicago when I learned about Sophie's FBI contact there." There was a pause. "I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to help." Emily looked at Sophie, who still seemed unconvinced. But Shadow had stopped growling. His posture relaxed now. Once again, Emily found herself trusting the dog's instincts. "I'm going to open the door," she said quietly to Sophie. "Stay back, just in case." Sophie nodded tensely, positioning herself behind the bathroom door where she could still see but wouldn't be immediately visible. Emily approached the door cautiously, Shadow at her side. She took a deep breath, then opened it, just enough to see outside. Detective Martinez stood there alone, as promised. He looked tired, his normally neat appearance rumpled, as if he'd been driving all night. "May I come in?" he asked. Emily glanced down at Shadow, who showed no signs of concern. She opened the door wider, allowing Martinez to enter. He stepped inside, immediately noticing Sophie partially hidden behind the bathroom door. "It's all right," he said, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. "I'm not here to arrest either of you." "Then why are you here?" Sophie demanded, still not emerging from her hiding place. Martinez reached slowly into his jacket, producing a flash drive of his own. "Because I found this in James Harris's office. Surveillance footage of the night David Chen died. Shows Harris behind the wheel of the car that hit him." Sophie's eyes widened. She stepped forward cautiously. "You believe me now?" "I started investigating after your allegations," Martinez admitted. "Quietly, on my own. Ellington has too many friends in the department for an official inquiry. What I found—" He shook his head. "It goes deeper than even you know, Sophie. Corruption in the mayor's office, the district attorney, even some judges. That's why we're taking the evidence to the FBI," Emily said, "bypassing local authorities entirely." Martinez nodded. "Smart move. But Ellington's men are closing in. They tracked you to Chicago faster than I expected. They'll be watching the library where you're planning to meet your contact." Sophie paled. "How do you know about that?" "Intercepted communications between Harris and his team. They've been monitoring your email, Sophie. They know about the meeting." Emily and Sophie exchanged alarmed glances. Their carefully laid plans were unraveling. "What do we do now?" Emily asked. Martinez looked at them seriously. "I have a better idea, one that keeps you both safe and ensures the evidence gets where it needs to go." As he outlined his plan, Emily felt a growing sense that they might actually succeed, that Sophie's nightmare might finally be coming to an end. Shadow seemed to feel it too, his tail wagging slightly as he listened to the detective speak, as if approving of what he heard. Outside, the sun shone brightly on what might be the final day of their journey. Whatever happened next, Emily knew that Shadow's refusal to move on that bridge had set them on the right path, a path toward justice, toward truth, toward redemption. And for that, she would be forever grateful to the golden retriever who had seen what no one else could see, who had sensed danger and courage in equal measure, who had brought together 3 unlikely allies in a quest that was only now reaching its conclusion. The bridge had been just the beginning. What lay ahead was the end of one story, and perhaps the beginning of another.